Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we get into it, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and it definitely matters. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with tonight's second half, shall we? So this is going to be a little different format than normal. Usually I have a set of encounters in front of me, or I already have some sort of planned kind of investigative whatever in front of me. Like when I talk about missing people or bodies being recovered, this and that. Today is a little different. I started thinking a lot about a question I had asked about Saint Christopher. But before we get into that, I want to share something with you. Now, I had gone to the Conjuring House just recently in Rhode Island and stayed the night there, did a overnight ghost hunt. And when we left, there was a small gift shop. I got a couple of t-shirts, a coffee mug, some dowsing rods, and I bought some of the well water in a glass vial. 2 glass vials full of well water. It's been about 2.5 weeks since I got home. And a lot of weird stuff had been happening at the house. Also, it felt like all of my energy was drained. And I couldn't get enough energy. But the second I left the house, like when I went to the location of my encounter, I had all the energy in the world. Not thinking about anything. I just, was like, well, maybe it's because I'm just overtired. I need to sleep more, this, and that. No. I started to think about, this is crazy because I'm going to get into the St. Christopher thing this way. But I started to think about things. And I started to think about how or where the haunting comes from in the Conjuring House. Now, one of the explanations or theories on where these hauntings stem from is that the house is built above an aquifer and that this well is a portal. Well, the well has water in it. Where does water come from? Well, the aquifer. And if that well is a portal, and that water has something to do with that portal, that makes that water dangerous. Dummy me. Brings it home. And yesterday, I put the 2 vials, I wrapped them up, and I put them in a location that houses my Ouija board and a couple other very strange things. It's a little blessed kind of area. The second I had them in that area, it was almost like a weight had been lifted. I'm still very tired, and I think that'll dissipate in a couple of days, but that's where my head keeps going. My head just went, oh, well, if this house is haunted by this, if one of these hauntings are occurring from this aquifer, and then I started to think about Saint Christopher. And what if Saint Christopher was a dogman who kind of turned his back on spirituality and turned his heart over to the Lord, Jesus Christ? So I started digging a little bit. And there's a website that I'm sure everybody who has looked into St. Christopher has read. But I used a VPN, and I went to a Russian website that talks about St. Christopher. And I found a lot of very interesting things, and I'm going to share that with you right now. Let's get into it. In the Roman Catholic Church, the feast of St. Christopher was suppressed entirely with Vatican II modernization, though he continues to be one of the most popular saints in Catholicism. His image adorning dashboards of cars all over the world. Also, police keep his pendant close to their heart as well. He's the patron saint of travel. I believe understanding St. Christopher and his iconography is of prime importance today. And hopefully it will become clear why as we travel through the Bible, tradition, and iconography to see if we can decipher this saint, who is such an affront to modern sensibilities. Scholars' studies of the origin of St. Christopher are available, but in these one must endure the usual ho-hum conclusions that Christian tradition develops, basically as a series of misunderstandings, confusions, and fantastical exaggerations. Modern scholars seem to believe that coherent meaning and analogy cannot exist without a kind of mechanical cause-effect historical development. When they see the overlays occurring in tradition between the term Cainite, son of Cain, or Canaanite, giants of Canaan, and Canaanite, dogmen, these scholars immediately enlighten us on the mistake transcriptions of those cave-dwelling Cro-Magnons of the Middle Ages, yet these same scholars remain blind to how profound and intuitive some of these relations can be. The use of dog-headed men in iconography is not limited to the icon of St. Christopher. They also appear most commonly in images of the Pentecost, primarily in Armenian manuscripts, but also in Western images. Dog-headed men are seen as the furthest race present at the Pentecost, because they are the furthest. In some Armenian images, they appeared in the center of the door, or else they appear alone, representing a distilled image of the ultimate foreigner. There are some other images, for example, a well-known image where dog-headed men are represented as the barbarian enemies who threatened Christ. Sometimes they are seen as one of the races encountered in the mission of the apostles. Finally, dog-headed men appear in the story of Saint Mercurius, a warrior saint whose father was eaten by two dog-headed men, later converted by Saint Mercurius. These dog-headed men's savage nature could be unleashed by Saint Mercurius on the enemies of the Roman Empire in a way of analogues to how the Romans and the latter Christians used barbarians in their own wars. The most obvious examples of this is how the recent converted Germanic barbarians stopped the advance of Islam into Europe, or how the recent converted Scandinavian prince of Kiev provided the Empire of Constantinople with a personal guard. These iconographic examples show a dog-headed men as representing barbarian foreigners, those living on the edge of the world, the edge of humanity itself. They are cannibal, savage, hybrid creatures who latter will be conceived as descendants of Cain fallen to a monstrous state. The giant Canaanite of Catholic image, who has now often integrated Orthodox iconography, though less visually shocking for having lost his monstrous face, signifies the same reality as dog-headed men. The giants in the Bible and in Christian tradition are often also interpreted as descendants of Cain and monstrous cannibal barbarians. So as I'm reading more and more, there's tons of stuff, and I encourage everybody to just really, not just when you Google it, don't just go from the first page. Really Google and really dive deep. Like when I finally I was sitting here and I'm like, wait, the pictures that I'm looking at right now, these are Orthodox. So that means they're Russian Orthodox or possibly Ethiopian Orthodox. So that's why I went to a VPN and looked up Russian information on Saint Christopher. And of course, you can translate it to English, which I encourage everyone to do. You know, I spent 4 hours doing this, and I've got I printed a lot of it out. I've probably got 60 pages of paperwork just to go through. Some say that because Saint Christopher went through Canaan, a region in the Bible, that it was translated wrong. And there is a breed of canine, get it? Or dog, Canaan. So they think that possibly the misinterpretation put a dog head on the body of Saint Christopher. And of course that was long ago. But anyway, I found this as well. There's so much more. Saint Christopher is well known as the patron saint of travelers, and modern depictions of the saint often show him carrying the Christ child over a river. This is certainly a far cry from earlier icons that clearly show the famous saint with the head of a dog. Many ancient cultures had myths that featured dog-headed race of men. This myth even continues today in popular Dogman stories. The ancient myth was oddly enough translated into early Christianity and was at first the central part of the story surrounding Saint Christopher. Essentially, the idea was that the men who lost their way and turned to a life of sin and acted like animals. Sin was always associated with the base animal desires of flesh, and some stories went so far to say that some men literally became part animal. The Egyptians were already familiar with depictions of a half jackal, half human god Anubis, and so it naturally translated into Christian icons. One story relates how St. Christopher was one of these dog-headed men, and upon encountering the Christ child regained his human appearance. It is primarily symbolic, showing how Christopher left his animal-like ways and embraced the gospel. Early Christians, especially in Egypt, decided to depict Christopher with a dog head to reference this story of conversion. It's a fascinating story, but one image you probably won't find on your St. Christopher medal or holy card. Now, like I said, there's multiple websites with a lot of just different information and some of the same information just regurgitated. I did find at the beginning of all this, I had talked about a Saint Mercurius or Mercurius, and I found that story, or whatever you want to call it, about his father being eaten by dog men. Check this out. So Saint Mercurius, martyr, name was interpreted as lover of the Father, also meaning servant of Jesus Christ. Holy man, was native to the city of Asclepius, which is also the city of his father and his grandfather, who were born therein. He was brought up in the city of Rome. Now the occupation of his father and grandfather and his kinsmen was that of hunters of wild beasts. One day they went out hunting according to their custom, and they found two men with faces of dogs, and they ate his grandfather. And they also wanted to eat his father, but the angel of the Lord prevented them in doing so. The angel said unto them, Touch him not, for from him shall go forth good fruit. Then the angel of the Lord surrounded them with fire, and being in tribulation, the two dog-headed men came to the father of Saint Mercurius, and they bowed low before him. Straightway God changed their savage nature into one of gentleness, and they became like sheep, and went with him to the city. After he had begotten the holy man, Mercurius, and he called his name Philopator, the dog faces lived with them for many days, and then they became Christians. Now the ancestors of the holy men had been in the days of the old pagans. When they received a gift of Christian baptism, they called the father of the holy man Noah, and his mother Tabit, and Mercurius. The dog faces, according to what the angel of the Lord said unto them when he appeared unto them, were in subjection to the holy man Mercurius and his father. When the king heard the story of the dog faces and how God had changed their savage natures, he ordered his soldiers to bring in the wild beasts. Before the king, the dog faces destroyed all the wild beasts, which the kingdom brought before them. Whilst the king saw this, he was afraid of them exceedingly, and he asked the father of Saint Mercurius to entreat God to remove them their savage nature, and make them to possess the nature of man. And he asked God, and God changed their nature, and they became like man. Then the king took the Holy Father Mercurius, and appointed him governor and captain of the army, and these dog faces were subject unto him, and all the people were afraid of them. After this, a certain wicked king rose up, and he wished to make war upon another king, and the king sent his soldiers to entice those dog faces, and to bring them to him. So the rest of the story is very, very long and very interesting. And I encourage you guys to check that out, to honestly do some digging and read it, because there's a lot more mention of dog faces. And that's kind of interesting how they're referred dog faces. Not dog men, not werewolf, dog faces. And needless to say, I'm starting to kind of lean towards that. What if one of these dog faces were changed? His wicked nature, his wickedness was taken from him by the Lord Jesus Christ or by the Father. And that would be possibly St. Christopher. And then St. Christopher just dedicated his life to the Lord and to Christianity. It's not too far of a stretch if you think about it. And after just researching all afternoon, I mean, I'm telling you that water from the Conjuring House really did a number on me. I didn't drink it. It was just in the vials, but like it was just I don't even know if it was evil. I think it was just more power than I was ever used to having in the house. Like, I've had some things. My grandfather was a Freemason, and I've met a couple of people who practiced in alchemy and stuff like that. And I've been around powerful kind of amulets and powerful magic and Native American magic and stuff like that. But this was just on a whole different level. So it's just drained me. But I really honestly think that possibly that Saint Christopher was a dog face, and the Lord removed his savagery. And that's how and why we see this. I mean, prior to a certain time in creation or in our history, dog faces were talked about in India, Mesopotamia, Rome, wherever, Ethiopia. And now it's just a hush-hush subject. So, I don't know. But there's another interesting thing that I came across. Check this out. So in Revelations, I think it's 22:14, blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. For without are dogs, and sorcerers, and whoremongers, and murderers, and idolaters, and whoever loveth and maketh a lie. Beware of the dogs. It's very strange, isn't it? Beware of the dogs. Yet, we are taught to love all of the living creatures. Yet, in the Bible, it says, beware of the dogs. Was he talking about the dog faces? Who knows? Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Once again, I'm going to keep trying to get rested up so I can break this kind of strange spell. And everyone stay safe. May the Great Spirit watch over us all. May he guide us down that path that we call life.